Hello and welcome to the TCM Howzat podcast. For the first time ever, we are coming to you in a podcast form so you can take us with you wherever you're going, is what I'm trying to say. Joining me for this one to talk through all the biggest cricketing stories from a fan perspective are Ben Stevens and Rob Rush. And every time we get to do one of these, we'll just be chatting through all the stories that have really caught our eyes in the past things. It's been a long time since we've done one of these. Rob, Ben, great to have you with us. Are you excited to get into the cricketing news that's gone on since October when we last did one of these, Rob?
I mean, there's definitely some positive news to talk about. There is also some negative news from the England point of view in terms of how results have gone, but that seems to be the way with England cricket at the minute. Well, for every bit of positive news, at least one bit of negative news to go alongside. But yeah, it's been a while since we've jumped on and done one of these, so yeah, it's good to be back.
And Ben, I don't think we've seen you for about a year, mate. Where have you been?
I've been side hustles.
Side hustles. What he's trying to tell you is that he's been busy being a traitor with a different sport.
He's also sorted out his Wi-Fi issues.
Yes, finally, hallelujah. Real ones will know. Coming up, we are going to talk, of course, about England and the fallout from the women's Ashes defeats, the defeats in the India ODI and T20 series. We'll turn at the end to look ahead to the Champions Trophy, which I forgot existed, so that'll be a fun segment. And, of course, the big news in English cricket, which is, of course, about investment in the 100. I've got a feeling that will be a little bit spicy. But, yes, let's start then in England terms and go to what has happened with English cricket in general since the last time we spoke. We'll start with the women's Ashes. England didn't win a single game. They got absolutely whitewashed. Heather Knight looked sort of perplexed by the whole thing. And it was one of the worst modern Ashes series that we've ever seen. Rob, what did you make of the women's performance that we saw just a couple of weeks ago?
It felt like it should be the end of an era as such. There were just, every single performance was littered with mistakes. There was no real. It was about as one-sided as you can get in a series, and that showed on the scoreline. You don't get whitewashed in close. You don't get whitewashed if the games are close. You get whitewashed if you played off the pitch. And England were. John Lewis, want to make sure that's the England's women head coach.
Yeah.
It probably should have been his last series coaching the women's side. Again, it's these are sorts of results that really, put job security under the microscope. I think there should, in my personal opinion, there should be a lot of changes in that women's squad setup. There's a lot of younger talent coming through that maybe hasn't been given an opportunity yet that they deserve to now get a shot. It was just for all, I think we do this to ourselves as England fans, don't we? Whenever there's an Ashes, whether it's men's or women's, we always do this to ourselves. We're like, oh, there's a chance here, there's a chance. And, we should also give Australia their credit. They have shown why they are the best side in women's cricket, why they have been the best side in women's cricket for the last 3, 4, 5 years, and why they will be for the next 4 or 5 years, or maybe even longer. So, from the England fan point of view, was very depressing. I didn't bother tuning into the last few matches of that tour once it was kind of summed up. But you see, everyone saw what happened on Twitter with the clips of the drop catches and the interviews after the game. Pretty sure we're going to get very soon onto the Alex Hartley situation. Just a very, very, very disappointing tour, and one that should see, in my opinion, a lot of change.
Well, John Lewis disagrees with you there. He did an interview with TNT on the last day of the tour, and he said that he felt that he was the right person to lead the team. Good news though, guys. The ECB are going to do a review into women's cricket, so that's good because English cricket loves a review after something goes wrong. Ben, I don't know if you caught much of the tour. What did you sort of make of England's performance? Because to me, it felt quite lackluster at times. It felt when they started losing matches consecutively, it just all fell apart really, and I think that was shown in the way England held themselves at times in games. They just threw it away again and again and again, and they were really thrashed as well. It wasn't just like close games. Most of them were. I mean, the Test match in particular, it was Australia won by an innings and 122 runs. Like, that is a huge thumping. What did you make of it all?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting one. Like, it's definitely one of those where, like, every time I open BBC Sport or ESPN, like Cricket Info or whatever, it all just seemed to merge into one by the end of it. That it was just Australia being absolutely all over England. I think it's really interesting. The thing that stuck out to me the most was, which I think is quite a stark thing and something that you don't see in elite level sport very often, is these obviously that Alex Hartley criticism of the fitness issues. Like, I think fitness is something that you almost take as read at elite level sports. So I think that was sort of a real damning indictment on the preparations and sort of where it's at. And I think that's a really interesting conversation, because obviously Alex Hartley is someone that has been around very well, the most successful English women's cricket sides in the last few years. So she knows what those standards are at, and she knows I think that's why she's got a reason and she's got a justification for commenting. So it was really sad to see, and I think English media generally, it's always as we know, it's a very torrid place for players and for people in the media, and often quite toxic. But I found myself siding with Alex Hartley. I think she should be allowed to call out those people, especially as they're people who she knows well. And I don't think anything that she said was unfair. You look at the performances, and there was a lack of fitness there.
I think I think you've hit on it there. So let's go into that then. Of course, for people who are listening and have forgotten, because it happened, about a month ago now. Basically, Alex Hartley came out and said that along the lines that she felt that the fitness levels in the England camp were not as they should be, and the response to that from the England team was, particularly from Sophie Eccleston, was to refuse to be interviewed by her on the telly. And I think this is for me speaks to two things really. I think firstly, if you're refusing to do television interviews, the wheels have clearly come off, because that is just a lashing out. But also, I don't think we'd be having this conversation, and it wouldn't have caused such a controversy if it had been in the men's game. I feel like the criticism that Alex Hartley was giving was very valid, and I felt that she shouldn't have suffered the backlash that she did from within the England camp. Rob, do you agree?
Overall, I agree, and I think where sort of the disconnect comes is from the fact that some of the women's players in the team have played with Alex Hartley, and so obviously there's the dressing room camaraderie that has been built up when Alex was with them. Alex obviously stepped away due to her mental health and wanted to take care of that, and then retiring from cricket. So it's Leah moving into sports media, and obviously she's a great person she was a great person for TNT to bring on for the coverage, because she has those connections. She knows the women in the dressing room. I agree with what Ben pointed out, is the fact that Alex has been a part of the most successful women's side that England have produced. So therefore, she knows what's required, and also the fact that fitness at the elite level should be taken as read. It's almost a non-negotiable. Like, you don't get to the top of elite sport without being supremely fit and ticking all those boxes. And for me, the whole thing can be summed up to is there were two ways the England squad could have responded to Alex Hartley's criticisms. Either they were genuinely hurt by them, so that they were false from Hartley, and that's why they didn't want to talk to her after games, or they knew that Hartley had hit the nail on the head and therefore didn't want to have to face the heat. Unfortunately, the performances for them did the talking, and it was the latter. They showed up very badly. I think it also gets summed up from the England media team, whoever was out there. I think it was Rihanna McDonald-Gay was on debut at the end of one of the final days of the Test match. She's on debut and she's kind of being pushed into the fire, as it will, of she knows there's been another bad day for the women in the field, and she's got to face some very awkward questioning, and then obviously John Lewis did his one after the game, but yeah, I think just for me, as I'd mentioned, there were two kind of responses, and the performances on the field showed that at Hartley was quite clearly on the right lines, and I don't agree with the women's reaction in terms of refusing to do TV interviews and refusing to chat to her. It also doesn't say a great thing when players then come out after this had come out that players were refusing to do interviews. It doesn't do great when you've got half the women's squad coming out and saying, no, we're not refusing. It's like, well, like it just wasn't good, and in a way it summed up the tour. It just there's fractions building, and just quite honestly, I think Hartley hit the nail on the head, and that is why I've mentioned in the very first part that there needs to be a lot of change with this England women's setup.
I think for me, I'll just read you a quote from Izzy Westbury, who was interviewed on 5 Live about this, and I think she said basically that she's got no problem with what Hartley said whatsoever, and that she can understand why some of the remarks have come from the England camp, but the fact is that women's sport is growing, they're professionals, it's a new era of women's sport in where they're well paid, and they have to remember they're not just athletes, but there's a wider obligation on them to speak to the media and to develop that relationship. And she puts in very frank terms as well that this was a response to them needing to improve, to Australia effectively thrashing them in every aspect. I think for the casual England fan, just to circle it back down to the cricket, which is, the most important thing, and we should remember, it is worth clarifying that in Ashes tours, we all get carried away in these media storms, and you have to sit back and think about the cricket as well. I think it is worth saying that before the tour, it certainly felt like this England team wasn't too far away from Australia. And so I think it was a real shock and a wake-up call for where they were. I know they've got new players coming into that England side, but in general, for me, it felt like they weren't in a terrible position going into that tour, and they should have competed a bit more. So are we being a bit dramatic in saying that a clear out and a refresh is needed, Ben? Or is it a valid criticism when you lose 16-0 in the Ashes down under?
16-0, but when you put it like that, that is just it's just outrageous, isn't it? Even by England and Australia standards. But no, I think I think one thing that there's no doubt that women's cricket in England has been on a positive trajectory for pretty much ever since well before they won the World Cup, but obviously ever since the World Cup as well. And like Rob alluded to, there has been unprecedented levels of investment, and there's a real positive kind of thrust being put into the women's game in terms of making the county setup and the kind of structure of the game in England better and more professional. That's undeniable. So I think in that case it is a valid criticism, because it's not like this is something that is just okay, in the grand scheme of the game and in the grand scheme of cricket, it's still in its early stages, but it's not like we're at the start of a project here. This is we're along the way of a journey, and these guys are, these people are elite professionals, and they have performed like that over a number of you've got some of these players going out into the IPL now and performing very, very well. So it's not like they haven't been performing. So I think it's completely valid criticism, but I also think that if it's something as fundamental as fitness, and to lose by that margin against, like you say, Simon, a team who before the tour the perception was England aren't too far away from, I don't necessarily think it's all on the players. And in fact, actually, I don't think the players should be the ones necessarily who have to answer for it in chief. because at the end of the day, it's a systematic thing, and it's what was the preparation like? How good were the conditioning sessions and the training and the preparation in the lead up to that, and how was that tour structured? Because cricket's huge for things like that, like we've seen with the stuff with the men and the not netting for a week. I'm sure we'll come on to that, but it's down to the ECB and it's down to the England directors and stuff at the end of the day to make sure that these teams are in the best possible shape. So I think it's a valid criticism, but I think just as much weight is has to be borne by the administration as well.
And I think the thing is there are mixed performances. We've given it a lot of slack there, talking about the Hartley thing, talking about the defeat. There were some good performances. I mean, Sophie Eccleston, she got a fifer after people were doubting her in the Test match. There were performances for Lauren Bell along the way as well, and some debuts in there as well. I think just finally on this, I want to talk about John Lewis's response to this, because I think his response sort of shocked me a little bit as an England fan, because surely what you want to hear from your coach is a sense of accountability, and I don't think he didn't have the accountability, but I think his reasonings were it felt very centred on Australia being a good side rather than England maybe having to look at doing things differently. Yes or no answer. Does John Lewis survive this, Rob?
In my mind, he shouldn't survive it. I think the ECB will see it a different way.
That's not a yes or no. Ben, yes or no?
I'm going to go yes, he will. But if, say, the next couple of series don't go well, then I think he will be shown the door.
Ben? No from Ben. Well, that's a really positive note to start this podcast on, to be honest. And it's a good job, because it's going to get even more positive, because it's time to turn to the England's men, who have also been having an absolute shocker. Now, let's set out the context to this. Of course, Brendan McCullum has taken over as England white ball coach, and they have had a series of 5 T20s and 3 one-day internationals in India. They lost the T20 series 4-1, and I think the ODI series was, I'm hoping someone will help me here, 3-0, a whitewash. Brilliant. So not good from them either. Ben, start of a new era. We were all hoping Brendan McCullum can bring a little bit of the flair of Bazball to the white ball side, inject it, because that's what it needed after the Matthew Mott era and a bit of dismal white ball cricket. It's not really gone as planned, has it?
I think the best way to describe the situation is that I have been yearning for Jason Roy and Liam Plunkett for probably.
I would have never have guessed that. I haven't seen anything that suggests that on any social media platform we have. It's not like there's been a tweet plopping up every so often talking about Jason Roy.
I've been going to bed with. I genuinely watched the 2019 final on YouTube the other night before bed. It was that bad.
Wow.
I've been, it's one of those, like, England versus India should always fill you with excitement, and I think especially with the Champions Trophy around the corner, like it really felt like quite a significant series. Okay, maybe not into, maybe it being more of a preparation thing for both of the teams, but it's England versus India, and India, like it's one of cricket's great fixtures. But I think there was just always a feeling, almost from that first game, just see how unconfident the England players are playing spin, and it's just so deflating to see just the perpetual lack of ability to manage it. I think it's just always it's always that tempo thing against India, like I just always just have this vision of Ravindra Jadeja just bowling dot ball after dot ball after dot ball, and just none of our batters having any real plan to him or any real idea of how to play him. And unfortunately, India just have spinners of that quality pretty much all the way through their side, and probably a couple more in reserve as well. So yeah, it's I I think in terms to come back to the Bazball thing and how it's translated into the white ball stuff, I'm willing to give it time. You know, I have no doubt. Like McCullum is a good coach, and yeah, okay, he probably is a little bit. I don't want to say arrogant, but maybe a little bit sort of blinkered at times. But I think that's also part of why we love it and part of what's given us the ride over the last 18 months that we've had. But yeah, I mean, this is a side that's been in, I don't even want to say transition, but been in sort of standstill really for a good 2 or 3 years now, not really moving in any particular direction. So I don't think we could have expected McCullum to come in straight away and come and change all of that. You know, I know he sort of did that in the tests, but you know, lightning doesn't strike twice.
Yeah, well, potentially. I think as well, what's frustrated me, Rob, about this series when I've been watching it is that I feel, and I've felt this all the way along throughout the Matthew Moss era and into this new Brendan McCullum era, is that I think England, on paper, have a very, very good T20 side, right? I think when you look at them, they have a decent T20 side. I think Phil Salt at the top of the order, brilliant. On his day, brilliant. You know, I think you've got star power in there. Josh Butler, on his day, brilliant. But when the lineup doesn't fire, it doesn't fire at all. And the issue for me is that something has just not quite clicked in that side. Am I being too generous to the players, Rob, or is this more a case of, you know, let's give them the benefit of the doubt? It's an away tour in India, spin's hard to play.
See, this is where it's a difficult one, because I would take your Phil Salt point and I would flip it on its head and go, outside of terrorising the West Indies in the West Indies, what has he done in an England shirt? In white ball cricket,
well, that's where you would expose my Lancashire bias. So let's not go there.
Well, that's just an example, though. Like you said, it like on their day, they are brilliant individual players. Even when Josh Butler's not on his day, he could still hit like an 80 ball 75 and linchpin in innings. But that hasn't been happening recently. You know, Butler was probably the only shining light in the T20 series, and that was few and far between. Look, I think, again, much as I said with the women's squad needing a refresh, I genuinely think it's a time that, you know, Brendan McCullum's at the start of a tenure here. This could be the time to bring in some new players and give them a go. You know, Tom Banton, quite rightfully, has just been brought back into the white ball setup, yes, albeit as cover while Jamie Smith was injured. Took his chance in the final ODI against India, played pretty well on return. And then again, something we'll go on to later with the Champions Trophy. The first team news has dropped. He's not even in the 11. It's like, well, the guy's been scoring runs for fun for Somerset in the Blast and every other team he's played for in franchise cricket, and he then gets one game in an England shirt.
To play devil's advocate on that point, though, hasn't Tom Banton already been given his opportunity and that didn't work, and then we've just called him up for cover? So, but that shouldn't really just entitle him to a place in the side.
Playing devil's advocate back to you, how many other players have been given their opportunities, not taken them, and then still been given like shots? Like, you know, there has to be a limit at some point. And I think with Banton, on a case by case basis, he probably hasn't been done the most fair.
I would argue on that point as well that actually, even with the chance that Banton, what was it, a couple of years ago, maybe 18 months ago, that there was a short. I think the last
time he was in was the bubble era. That was the last time he was in England.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's such a throwback.
I actually think that even then, I remember. I think I can't remember who it was against, but he scored 100, didn't he? And I actually think he looked. Yeah, he's actually looked one of the most imposing in an England shirt of this sort of stagnation period. But yeah, I think I'd probably side with Rob on this one. That I do think Banton's probably been unfairly treated.
It's so unlike me to be out on a limb doing having my own opinion.
And then looking further on down this list, like again, you mentioned Liam Livingstone is kind of. I feel like Liam Livingstone, fairly or unfairly.
Don't get me started. Do not get me started.
I feel like fairly or unfairly, Liam Livingstone is like the epitome of this England white ball side for the last 4 or 5 years. Like
Absolutely.
on their day, on Livingston's day, he is
unbelievable.
He's a
If we
batsman.
tweet about him, just to clarify, if we tweet about him, unbelievable.
On his day, he's a gun batter who can go score runs for fun, send spinners out the ground, take everyone on. I think there was an ODI against India down at Southampton where the batting lineup failed again, but he linchpinned the innings and hit 97 not out, and that ended up being a winning score for England. It got them over the line. And he's also proven he can be versatile with both off spin and leg spin. However, their days are not consistent enough where this sort of stuff happens. So therefore, when the top order fails and he's in earlier than he would expect, just for some reason or other, it doesn't work out. He goes early, and then the rest of the back line falls apart, and we end up left short. We're now seeing it. Mark Wood is now still battling injuries as always. He's now got his heightened role with the Test squad. Is it potentially time to start looking at some younger fast bowlers to be brought in? I'd advocate, this will please you, Keg, I'd advocate Saqib Mahmood getting a few more chances.
I was going to come to Mahmood. It was on my list.
It's on my list. What did Brendan McCullum say for the T20 series? Every player is going to get an opportunity to play. Did he forget he took Rayan Ahmed out there? Rayan Ahmed, I get we've got Adil Rashid, who was amazing.
Yeah, on the Rayan Ahmed point, I think probably as well. How you were saying that some players are the epitome of this England side. I'd argue from a different perspective, Rayan Ahmed works out as the epitome of this England side, which is that he broke onto the scene, right? It was like everyone's all in for Rayan Ahmed, and then it's just all gone a little bit quiet.
And now he's just faded back into the background. It's how he comes back to front again. So.
I think, do you feel, Ben, perhaps there's a lack of plan, a lack of clarity, a lack of knowing what they're actually building up to? I know they're building up to the next T20 ODI World Cup, but a lack in the immediate term of thinking about bilateral series, when in the greater scheme of cricket, they don't really matter that much.
100. I think you've hit the nail on the head there for once, Simon.
Yeah! Thanks for joining us on the TCM Howzat podcast. That's it. Good night. Continue.
The lack of clarity, I think, if we're comparing, not to compare it to the 2019 side, but Morgan's side, but obviously I think you can't really look at it without doing so. There was this sort of almost from 2 or 3 years out, there was this idea that Morgan was building towards home World Cup, and this was going to be the epitome of all the good work that they'd done, and this whole era and this whole generation. I think I was reading something the other day about his captaincy and just how measured it was in terms of, right, I know tactically, I know this is what I want from each of the players in my team and the roles and what they're going to fulfill. And it was all, it was all planned out in that way. And that's why you saw the likes of people like Liam Plunkett shining in the way that they did, because we knew that we needed those middle overs sorting and some, so it was sort of like, it was horses for courses, but, in the best possible way. This sort of just feels, this era, I agree, probably has something to do with the fact that ODI cricket's relevance is, waning a little bit, or has been certainly for a couple of years. But certainly on England, on the England radar, in the ECB, it will have been the lowest priority. And I think we're just seeing we're seeing the fruits of that fact. At the end of the day, it just seems to be this just procession line of, he's a decent white ball player. He's hit a few in the T20s. We'll get him in and see what he's, I think, the selection of Gus Atkinson, I think, is something that kind of epitomizes it to an extent, because it's like, he's obviously been an absolute revelation in the red ball stuff, but you feel like he's sort of just been picked purely for that, as opposed to actually looking at his skill set and saying, is this a bowler that can succeed and that can be successful for us? And that's not to say that he's going to go on, not go on and work out and be a good 50 over bowler. But when you look at how he bowled in that India series, it's a guy that he didn't really know what lengths he should be bowling. He was getting hit around. There was no real wicket taking strategy from what I saw of it. And actually, to go back to what Rob was saying about refreshing and kind of getting a load of new players in for sort of this next era, I actually think when you look down the team at the minute, quite a lot of the players are very inexperienced already.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
Aside from Root, who's obviously only just come back in,
Yeah.
you've got obviously Butler, Archer,
Rashid,
Livingston. I suppose you could say is sort of half experienced, but there's not actually anyone in there. Everyone's sort of at that 30 to 40 kind of ODIs. And then you look at people like Smith coming in and Atkinson and Cast, and it's like 4 or 5. So actually, if you're refreshing everything, what are you actually achieving? You know, that would be my question.
I suppose on that point, my gut feeling is that when I look down these team sheets of the people who've been playing, I don't see that and think, oh, that's a team that needs to be particularly refreshed. I don't think there's loads of inexperience, and I'm not sure getting more inexperience is the country. I mean, is the solution. I mean, of course, we all will advocate for whoever our county players are and who do well in the Blast. But on a more serious point, like, how do you get a team to gel and to bond? And I think this sort of leads in. You can't say that. Oh dear me.
I mean, just before we move on, there's one other point. That India T20 series, we had Jamie Overton batting at 7 as a specialist bat when he's an all-rounder.
It is one of the most heinous crimes committed in English cricket.
You talk about the inexperience factors. But inexperience, that's just common sense. Like, what are we doing here? Like, if you're going to bat Jamie Overton, he probably can't bat any higher than 8. And no, probably can't. He proved that he can't really bat higher than 8. So therefore, you need another batter in there. And just one that comes to the top of mind, someone like Will Smead, who's dominated the Blast at periods, and again has probably deserved a shot at international cricket, but just hasn't got it. You know, if you can strengthen the batting order a little bit, you know, I said that Jamie Overton selection. I was just looking through the Champions Trophy squad there, seeing he was in there, and he because I knew there was something that one for me was just like a prime example of just what are we doing here? If we're sticking a all rounder down as a specialist bat at number 7. What are we doing here? It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So that's kind of where I'm at. Where if you're not going to take this, to me that screams a little bit of we don't really care. Like, we're just going to do different stuff. So is there like, right? Well, if you're going to do that, then you might as well go full shebang and go, right, let's have some new players in. But I get Ben's point fully. Like, this is a group of players that haven't played a lot of ODIs together as a team. Like, Jamie Smith's batting at 3 in England's Champions Trophy opener. He's batted once there before in 50 over domestic cricket. But hey, he hadn't batted 7 really before Test cricket, and look how he's taken to Test cricket. So you never know.
Viva la Bazball. We're going to turn to more positive things in just a moment. You are listening to the TCM Howzat podcast. Welcome back along to the TCM Howzat podcast. Still got Ben Stevens and Rob Rush alongside myself, Simon Reynolds, and we're talking through the biggest cricketing stories that we have caught our eyes over the past month or so. Time to go from some negative topics to an even more spicier topic, and I have a feeling I'm going to have fun with you two on this one because it's time to talk about everyone's favourite competition in cricket, the 100. Since we last talked, basically, lots and lots of money has been thrown into the English game. I think the figure at the end has hit an eye-watering £975 million for teams in the 100. What are they actually buying? Well, they're buying shares in the teams of the 100. Some of them get more shares than others. For example, down at Hampshire, their owners have taken on 100% of the Southern Brave franchise because they also own the cricket club. But in some instances, it'll be a 49% stake with the host county taking on 51%. Lots and lots of money has been thrown into this, and lots of investors have been thrown into this as well. We're talking Google, Microsoft, Todd Bowley, big names in sport and investment. Boys, are you not excited? Ben?
Well, first of all, I've got to be conscious I'm talking to 100 inductee inside of here. I've got to be careful. I've got to be careful.
Hey, listen, go on, you go first. Go on, I'll let you go.
At the end of the day, money coming into like I've been very should we call it gammon sort of leaning in terms of my opinions on the 100 since it started. I very much always thought that it should have been money that was directed at the Blast, which was already a fantastic T20 product in my opinion. However, money into the English game is a positive thing, and I have always resonated with the ideals that the 100 are is trying to instill, and the vision for it, albeit I think it's been done a little bit messily so far in my opinion. It remains to be seen how this money is going to be spent. It remains to be seen how it's going to be, how IPLified it's going to become, and if it's just going to become, another iteration of, the Indian sort of, monopoly. I think the big thing in terms of making it a success really is, is going to be the level of names that they get in. Is this extra money going to allow them to go out and get your Virat Kohlis and go and get your, Heinrich Klaassens and people like that, who are going to really draw people in and provide that X factor? Because, the last couple of years of the 100, and again, I will admit, being a bit of a, an old head with this, I've not tuned into it too much, but when I have tuned into it, it's not really, even me as a sort of a pretty passionate and well-informed cricket fan, it's not really drawn me in that much in terms of the names and in terms of the the matchups and the lineups. But again, I think the overarching point here is money into the English game, as long as that feeds down through into the counties and benefits the game ultimately at the grassroots, it can only be a good thing if that money is spent well. However, they do still need to sort out their branding and sort out their marketing.
Okay, that's enough. Thank you. I thought you were
but that's a story for another podcast.
Steady on. I think I was about to say, if you'd have just stopped there, I would have gone, that was actually quite fair, reasonable, and rational. However, you lost it slightly towards the end. Rob, I mean, I honestly, I feel like I'm up against a brick wall here talking. So let me make my case first, which is, Ben, you mentioned about where the money's being spent, and you acknowledge that that's a good thing. What I will say is this, right? 10% of the revenue is going straight to recreational cricket, which is a huge amount of money in this game. The rest will be split, right, like this. 275 million divided 19 ways between the 18 first-class counties and the MCC. The next 150 million divided 11 ways between the non-host counties, right? A section of money for the non-host counties, right? And then anything after that goes 19 ways again. So my point to this is, and I take your point, Ben, as well, that it hasn't been seamless. It's been messy. It's created a civil war in cricket between fans, right? Which is not something that any sport needs, right? And whatever side you're on, it gets divisive, it gets nasty. People don't really end up talking in a rational way. But my point is that the money that's being invested here is more than English cricket has ever seen before. And if it is split in that ways between the non-host counties are also getting money. I mean, you take, for example, Worcestershire, don't have a lot of income that they can rely on. Their ground gets flooded all the time. The money that could come from the 100 to them as part of that 11 host counties and the money elsewhere, I mean, that could be game-changing. I mean, for Lancashire as well, to take an example for Lancashire, with the money from the 100, the club is being able to pay down its debts, is being able to get rid of its debts from doing and become a more viable business money. Rob, am I getting carried away in saying that this is all a good thing? I can't see how this investment is a bad thing for the English game and English cricket in general. Do you want to counter me on that?
Do you know what, Simon? I'm going to surprise you with where I'm going to start with this. I'm going to agree with the overwhelming positive that,
Yeah, that's twice. That's twice.
Anyone can argue about whether they like the 100, they dislike the 100, the marketing, the branding, whatever. You can argue all of that. What the auction proved and what this whole process has proved is that there is an appetite for it. Imagine how much egg on the face of everyone involved at the ECB would have had if they did this whole auctioning process and say there was not even a tenth of the money involved. Like, at that point, you'd have everyone who's staunchly against 100 going, this is the time, the ECB, where you just, write all this off, you cancel it, and then you put this money into the blast instead. But what the auction showed, that there is definitely an appetite for it, and then there's still the constant rumours that there's going to be expansion, and that, Somerset and Durham are the two likely counties that are going to get on board and make it a 10-team franchise. How much more money is that going to bring in with, when they decide they want to come in from 2029 or wherever it is? There are already rumours going around that investors are already looking at how they can get in straight away for 2029. So, as you point out there, Simon, the way the money is being divided between the counties, like, obviously everyone knows I've got links to Durham. I know roughly how much money Durham have received from this. That's massive for a club that is now going into one of the clubs that now has a professional women's team for the first time, going into this 2025 domestic season. The existing infrastructure, all the work that's gone on at Durham. You mentioned Worcestershire. It's a great example, a club that a smaller club traditionally have always punched above their weight, are doing so. We're having the ground flooded every year. They're going to have to look at moving out of New Road, unfortunately, which is a phenomenal ground. I'll be very sad if I don't get to see it before it has to be moved out of there. But all this money, like you say, it's a positive thing, and I'm glad the ECB are doing the right thing in terms of distributing this money amongst the counties, and they're sticking true to their word on that front. Having said all that, it would be remiss not to talk about what is happening with some of the teams in terms of they're already talking about changing the logos, changing the team names. For those fans of those teams that have already started there, are you telling their parents that, so we're changing the team name, all of these England, the central contracted players, they might not be here. Now the counties have taken control for this year. We should also specify that these franchises now are not changing until 2026. The takeover is not happening until 2026. So the auctions has happened, but the counties now have control for 2025. And then for 2026, that's when all these changes are due to come in. But, London Spirit has already come out that they're planning to incorporate the MCC colours into their kit. Shock horror, the MCC want to change something as soon as they get a chance. With the 100.
But also, just on the MCC colours, they're horrible. I just don't.
They are indeed. They're horrible. That's a horrible colour. It's a horrible
red and yellow on a D20 kit.
Wait, is that not also the exact same colours as the Welsh Fire?
You've got Welsh Fire. You've got Trent Rocket.
I just thought about that now, but. Sorry, we're really digressing on the point here, Rob. I'm sure we can do another pod.
It's coming back to my branding and marketing point. That's all I'm saying.
Exactly.
We can do another pod. I promise you, we'll do another pod on kits in cricket. Right, for an hour, we'll sit here and talk about that. However, Rob, as you were, continue on your point.
But yeah, as Ben mentioned, can this now get you the massive names in cricket? Can this get them in? There's already talks of where's Rashid Khan going to play? Where is can we get someone like a Henrik Larsson? Can we get can we get these bigger names, especially the Indian market? Because obviously we know the rules if they're with the BCCI and players not really. If you're on an Indian contract, you can't really play any franchise leagues around the world. They've already said as well that they. I don't know if this is just lip service, but all the Indian investment shouldn't affect the Pakistani players. I think that's probably true in context, but I think you'll probably see teams that are IPL owned probably don't have any Pakistan players, and they all kind of migrate to the 2 or 3 teams that aren't under IPL ownership. So there's Jesus Christ, we went so off topic now. I've forgotten what I was talking about.
I think.
this like ECB central contracted players, are you going to tell London Spirit fans that have been used to seeing Zach Crawley and Dan Lawrence and co, are you know, who's to say they're still going to be there with these new ownership? They might come in from 2026 and go,
Correct.
do you know what? We want completely new players. Is they're like, well, parents of young kids who've been taking their kids to Lords to watch 100 games on an evening in the summer, they've got to go, well, actually, no, we've got New England players. And how are you going to explain that? And is it all just going to become way too complicated is what I'm getting at. Whereas, you know, as I say, people have just got used to the teams, the franchises, the players. Yes, there's still some player movement in terms of, you know, people choosing to be in for the 100 or not. But I mean, Ben Stokes choosing to be in for the first edition and then saying, do you know what, guys, I'm not really interested. Peace out. You know, now with the counties taking back, you know, Yorkshire, I'd imagine you'll see there'll be a fair few more Yorkshire players picked up for this year's 100 and some less Durham players.
Potentially not, though, because of the fact Yorkshire have sold 100% in their
Maybe not. Maybe not, but maybe for this year. Maybe for this year, while it's the 1 year that Yorkshire have got complete control of the franchise. Maybe there is.
I think just to, you know, to talk, I think you're right. I think your concerns are valid about, you know, where this goes from here and how you go explaining it. I suppose my hope as a fan is that actually this marks a point where we can start to draw a line under the division of what went before, in terms of the fact it's bringing a big investment into the game. You know, I understand county fans got annoyed about it. I understand it wasn't done in the right way. But at some point, in order to grow as a sport, we need to come together and make it work, right? And I feel that the point when the 100 reinvents itself, not this season, as we've mentioned, is a transition season, but the season afterwards could be a moment for the sport to do that. Ben, is that probably? Go on, Rob.
Sorry, just so to take it into maybe a different sport, just as a quick comparison. So F1 have got a new team coming in for 2026, and you know it's under a really big name, and you know everyone's now talking about what drivers are going to get, what team name they're going to race under, and all this sort of stuff. So that's what they're hoping for with the 100. You know, like new teams and stuff like that, and or different team names, they will work with new players and everything like that. And that's what it'll be for 2029 when Somerset and Durham are hoping that they join the party. So, yeah, I agree with you. That's what kind of there needs to be a line drawn under. Whether English county cricket fans are going to allow that line to be drawn is a completely different question. And I think we all know the answer that it's probably not going to be drawn. But, yeah, I think ultimately let's take the massive positive big picture from this. This is an insane amount of money that's being thrown into the English domestic game. We now have to hope that everyone involved receiving this money doesn't fritter it away and uses it wisely, because if it's used wisely, this could transcend English cricket.
Ben, final thoughts on this?
The only thing that I was going to say is there a piece, an angle to look at this and sort of mourn the potential loss of the Vitality Blast? And I know it's not going anywhere, but we've seen what the 100 has already done, and the schedule has already done to the one day, and the sort of, I know it sort of had a bit of a rebirth with the Metro Bank and all of that sort of social media stuff, but we've already seen what it's done in terms of the quality of that competition. So I suppose my only question would be, inevitably going to be the increased money, the increased attention, the increased sort of focus given to the 100 now over the next sort of decade. Where's that going to leave the Vitality Blast, or the Blast, which in my opinion is a really strong product and something that still really brings English cricket together every year? Are we going to see that drop off in? I don't know how. I haven't looked at how they're going to work out the schedules, but to me, it's going to look as it. I would predict it will become even more marginalised after a couple of years where really I felt that especially the finals days were, really, really positive, and it's been a really strong competition.
I think, yeah, you're right. It's the implications for the schedule in general.
I think we can set up 2 new podcasts here.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah. One is how do you solve the problem of English cricket?
The second one is you've got the Rubik's Cube, otherwise known as the English cricketing calendar from 2026 onwards.
There we go. We teeing it off. Format ideas are there. Keep rolling them off. Production meeting.
You have an hour and a half. You have an hour and a half to solve it. Go figure.
Go. Lots to look forward to if you're a cricket nerd on by listening to this podcast. We're going to leave that there. Of course, the 100 will return later this summer.
Will you be fronting the?
No, I don't know, but I'll be watching the Manchester Originals and hoping that they're better than last year. Anyway, let's move on to our final.
They've got you very well PR trained, Simon. I'll tell you that.
let's
those courses he took are paying off.
Okay, steady on, everyone. Steady on. Let's move on. I feel like it's gone into chaos now. Let's move on to the Champions Trophy.
It's about time it went into chaos. We're about 50 minutes into
we love it. We love it. We love it when it goes to chaos. Anyone still listening? If you're still there, we're going to talk about the Champions Trophy. Now, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to start this discussion by posing the simple question to you, Ben and Rob. I was thinking when I was actually at work and Sky Sports was on and there was a trailer for it. And I was thinking, I've not seen that in a while. Where's that been?
I had the same sort of response, but for the India White Ball Tour. And it was more so along the lines of, can I be bothered to watch this? And I remember it's on TNT.
Yeah.
So anything
I think what I'm going to do now is, because Ben, you've done your research on this, sell the Champions Trophy to me. Go.
He's put you right on the spot
there. First and foremost, for England fans, I would try and focus on anything other than England for this Champions Trophy to get any sort of enjoyment out of it. But to sell you the Champions Trophy as a format, I think it is a really interesting one because I think it's, objectively something that has always thrown up. It's a competition that has always thrown up a lot of interest and a lot of excitement, and seems to, even this in what is probably ODI cricket's darkest days, realistically, it seems to have galvanised the cricketing world and galvanised the cricketing community in terms of that interest and kind of getting people hyped up for it. Maybe not in England, but certainly in India and Pakistan, and people are excited for this. I think there's a lot of great stories around the Champions Trophy. Not simply the fact that it's the first one for 8 years, not simply that it's the first ICC tournament in Pakistan since 1998, I think it is. So obviously, lots going on there. I just think there's some great stories, and I think ODI cricket always shows itself. I mean, I think I put it as one of my sort of thought vomits on the TCM Twitter the other day. But
that's such a great way to describe our account. Thought vomit.
But just when you think ODI cricket is dying away, it sort of just comes back and shows you that there is why everyone loves it so much. And I think the Champions Trophy is a really nice, encapsulation of that. I think Afghanistan are going to be a really interesting, seeing them against South Africa tomorrow. That's going to be a really interesting story. It's going to be, really quite strong spinning pitches from what we've seen in the first couple of games already. So obviously that's going to play into their hands, and they've actually also got a really solid pace bowling lineup now as well. So I'll be really interested to see Afghanistan and see how they go. At the end of the day, you've got all the big names, you've got all the best players in the world that are there, and I think that makes it exciting. In essence.
I like your enthusiasm. I'm now going to take that down a level by asking Rob, what's the need for this? It's been gone for 8 years.
I think it's kind of what Ben's alluded to there. This is ODIs, this is a dark period in terms of ODIs. There's less and less ODIs being played. There's always constant talks about if ODIs are going to be canned, permanently, with all the extra cricket that's coming on. For instance, you've got James Vince and Alex Hales quitting English cricket to go be a global freelancer for 2025. I mean, they weren't in the actual picture anyway. But how many? They've set the benchmark. You can't. How many more players do we all know and can name that are bouncing from franchise league to franchise league, just playing? Ashton Turner was playing in the Big Bash in Australia over Christmas and New Year, and then was flying out to South Africa.
Another pod idea, Ashton Turner. Can we just wax lyrical about him for an hour? Because I am obsessed.
You will enjoy him having joined Lancashire then for the 2025 Blast.
Yes,
have you seen that? Have you seen that?
Yes, I have. Surprisingly,
Good.
my Lancashire bias might come into that a little bit.
He's a cracking bloke. Just make sure you don't ask him a very closed question because you'll get a very closed response. Anyway.
Okay. Gary.
I personally haven't had that experience with him because he's been quality with me, but I'm just saying other interviewers haven't exactly had the best luck. But how many other players do we know that just bounce around from franchise league to franchise league, playing endless competitions, and then don't, and therefore are not available for their countries? Liam Dawson, as an example, I think a couple of years ago, he had the very first or second year of the SA20, he had a deal with a team, and he was due to get called up for England. And it turns out because he's not on an England contract, it would cost him money to play for England. And so when you've got situations like that happening, why would players, turn down franchise deals and go play for their country? So I think that's why the Champions Trophy has been brought back. I didn't watch a lot of it when it was around 7-8 years ago, so I'm personally trying to keep abreast of it as much as I can to kind of see what it is. Just a rundown of England's squad, because some people might not have seen it. You've got Joss Butler, Jofra Archer, Gus Atkinson. Tom Banton has replaced Jacob Bethel through injury. Harry Brook, Bryden Cast, Ben Duckett, Liam Livingston, Saqib Mahmood, Jamie Overton, Adil Rashid, Joe Root, Phil Salt, Jamie Smith, and Mark Wood. I mean, I feel like I have to agree with Ben in terms of, if you're an England fan, I'd be trying to focus on anything else other than England, because it's not a very inspiring in terms of how England have just played the ODIs against India. I'm not full of confidence.
It would be the most England cricket thing ever to have done absolutely rubbish for the past
and then go
2
and
months, and then go and win the Champions Trophy.
It would be, and that would be some way to silence all the criticism.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think Ben Duckett would sprout a pair of wings and just ascend into heaven.
I mean, England are back.
England winning his runs, and then he's just there. Off he goes.
Yeah, you can tell Bazball was definitely seeped in with one aspect of the white ball side already. We've gone to naming our team 48 hours before our first game is started. So that's
Brendan McCullum's got the lottery numbers for Friday. That would be really helpful.
I guess the only thing, Ben, I will let you speak eventually.
This is TCM Heritage. This is go on.
I think the only thing I would really like in there, Ben said it's got all the big dogs in there. This is where I would love to have the Netherlands, Scotland. This is where I would love to have some of these guys who don't get to play top tier regular international cricket, especially ODIs. Think about some of the players. You've got Brendan McMullen for Scotland. You've got guys like Bastellader, Logan van Beek from the Netherlands, who we know these guys. They've spent time in the county circuit or they've spent time on the international circuit, and we've seen them around. But then they don't get invited to the big parties like this. Say we had those two in there, and we saw New Zealand absolutely trounce Pakistan in the first game of the tournament. Say Scotland or Netherlands win that first game of the tournament, and they pulled off the upset. Imagine how that would kickstart the tournament. You've got the Netherlands taking down the host nation. It's like that would set. I
agree. I love seeing minor nations in tournaments, but then at that point, it's just a World Cup, isn't it?
I was just about to say that.
It's very true. Which also, I think that's another debate. Get this on the ideas list. We need to talk about whether there's too many World Cups in cricket, because I personally think there is, and I think cricket would benefit from that. Anyway, Ben, back to the Champions Trophy. You've done research. Who should I be watching? Who should I be keeping my eye on to win this tournament? Who's the one who's going to get me out of bed, stick on the telly, and watch it? Who is that person? That team or person?
Well, I mean, every single piece of cricket media I've listened to so far have gone with the boring, straight down the forward defence answer of India, and so in true TCM counterculture heritage,
Yes,
I'm going to go against that. But I think my one, and I've spoken about them, quite a lot. I think when we did the T20 World Cup as well, they were one of the ones that I sort of picked up. Is South Africa? I think they're in a really lovely era at the minute of white ball and red ball cricket. To be honest, white ball especially. Actually, the comparison has just come into my mind, but I actually think they remind me a lot of Owen Morgan's England team in terms of just there seems to be really defined and definitive roles all the way through the lineup for every single player, and there's a lot of players who are right at the peak of their powers. Even people like David Miller, okay, he might be, getting on mid-30s now, seems to be sort of hitting another peak in terms of just, he is going to go out there and he is going to, he is just perfectly refined as a white ball finisher now. And then obviously you've got the young players like DeWalt Brevis and Marco Janssen who are sort of coming through. So, and that's not even talking about Rabada and Clarkson who are just, sort of elite level players. So I think there's just a real energy to South Africa and a real sort of clinical edge to them. They haven't quite been able to get it over the line. Obviously, they lost in the final of the T20 World Cup, but I would really, I think they will batter England personally.
Yeah,
I'm not looking forward to that game at all.
I sort of am, mainly from the fact,
like
as
South
you say,
Africa, so
I really like
seeing
South
them
Africa, and I have to say, seeing them come into a phase in cricket where they're doing much better than they were at one point, and rebuilding that team and rebuilding that side so they're challenging at these major tournaments is a really positive thing for cricket, isn't it?
And they've got yet another 18-year-old fast bowler who's
another one.
Mapaxa or something, I think it is. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but in the Tri Series, I just remember flicking it on, and all of a sudden there's this guy just bowling 150 clicks, and I'm just like, there's another one off the production line.
So
and then Corbin Bosch obviously as well. So they've just got an abundance of riches. So South Africa would be my pick.
I think they're on a good run at the minute. They've in the last 14 they've won 10 and only lost 4. So like you said, Ben, they've hit their stride.
I'm sorry, have you done some research? Have you done some research? No. Did you pull that out of the top of your head? That's quite impressive,
I saw something on ESPN Cricket Info a couple of days ago about that stat. So thanks to ESPN Cricket Info for that one.
Ben, I suppose then, who's the underdog in this tournament? Who's the team who you're looking at and you're thinking could do well, could do rubbish?
I swear to God, if you say New Zealand here, you can have the entire country on your back for calling them underdogs yet again.
No, well, I mean, I've already spoken a little bit about Afghanistan. I guess a potentially contentious one in terms of, I know there's a bit of political stuff going on with them at the minute, but I think when you look at Afghanistan purely as a cricketing team, they're a really, really good outfit. They seem really confident. And obviously they picked up a couple of big wins in the last ODI World Cup as well. Again, they're another one. I think whenever you watch their batsmen especially, I think there's just always sort of there's a real nice style and sort of flair to their batting, which I think just makes them a really easy side to watch. I wonder if maybe we would just speak a little bit about England, I suppose, and who we might see. Who you would like to see have a good tournament, I suppose, and maybe who needs a good tournament, just for their career generally.
I've got a couple names that immediately come to mind.
Okay,
Rob, we'll go to you first. I'm taking the chair here.
Yeah, I'll sit back.
See you later, Simon.
Sit back. Bye. Off you go.
I've mentioned him earlier. I really hope Tom Banton gets a crack because I do think he's turned a corner the last 18 months, and I think if Banton does get a crack, I think he is going to take. We've seen it in that last India ODI. He'd shown he could potentially be a very valuable piece of this England team. Another one that I don't think is going to come at any surprise when you hear it come out of my mouth is Bryden Class. He's missed the back end of that India series with a
Durham
toe injury. Sorry, the Lancashire bias man is chatting up all of a sudden. But Cast has been sort of he came. I guess there's not really been a lot of positives from the ODI side, but he's been maybe one of the few. Him and Matthew Potts took Australia apart at Lords in one of the ODIs last summer. So he's kind of, when he's been fit, he's shown that he can take wickets quite regularly. We've seen that with him in the Test side now as well over the winter. He's playing himself to be a really important part in England's plans for the next 12, 18 months and definitely beyond that. A couple guys that I think need it for their careers. I am going to go Liam Livingstone because, again, as we mentioned earlier, he just kind of is the epitome. There are other guys that could make a play for having his spot. I'm sorry, Lancashire fan. I'm sorry.
I'm just going to say, I think regardless of what happens in any ODI tournament or T20 tournament for England across the next 3 or 4 years, I think Liam Livingstone will still be in that side.
He may well be. We don't know yet. But I think for me, Livingstone needs one. And then I'm going to go with Phil Salt is the other one. Again,
right, okay, well, that's just like the bias, isn't it?
Genuinely, though, as I mentioned, that he's sort of underperformed for the talent he has. We all saw him at Sussex, and we've seen him more recently at Lancashire. He can terrorise bowling attacks, but there just has been something stepping up to the international level where he just hasn't quite clicked yet. I mean, if we need to put, 7 consecutive tours to the West Indies for white ball cricket so Phil Salt can get his eye in, then I don't think any England fan's going to complain about that because everyone loves a trip to the West Indies to go watch some cricket. But especially when we've seen Will Jacks as well, he's had his chances and he's maybe not taken them, but that is one that I think immediately you could make a very compelling case to swap Will Jacks in for Phil Salt. And then also maybe not there for the career, but you're thinking Joe Root and Mark Wood. England are really trying to get this white ball side rejuvenated. If they can't do it, is it really worth trundling these guys out for white ball games when there is an Ashes series coming up at the end of this year? Joe Root is going to need to be in fine form to give England any chance of winning. Mark Wood is going to need to be fit to have England to have any chance. And for Brendan McCullum's plan of we want big, fast, 6'8" bowlers who can bowl 150 plus clicks in Australia. If that's very much Brendan McCullum's philosophy. If we can't do that, then we're not going to win the Ashes, apparently. So those are my players. I know I said I had a couple. I've given you 6 there. I've given you.
Yeah, so Rob's chosen the entire side. Brilliant. Ben, I'll be more succinct for you. I think I'm going to go for, I would say, who I'm excited to see is Jamie Smith, because one thing that I will give Brendan McCullum credit for is that Joss Buttler has stopped keeping. And now this has been one of my problems with his captaincy. I think I have a problem with captain keepers. That's just a separate thing. But I think Jamie Smith, young talent coming into the side, could be really good. I think in terms of who looks to hang on in that side, I think as much as I don't think he ever will be dropped, I think Liam Livingstone has to have a good tournament. And I also would probably go with, I think I'd go with Ben Duckett. I just think he's very on and off. That's all I'd say. Probably a bit harsh.
Probably our best looking bat.
Yeah, I agree, but I just,
is that a big achievement though? Recently, Ben,
exactly. And I think maybe a wake up call for them all. Do you know who's flown under the radar? Who we didn't really talk about in that first segment on India is Jofra Archer. I mean, everyone was very, very hyped up for his return to white ball cricket, and I feel like it's not lived up to the hype. So maybe for him to have a good series would be a really positive pick. Do I think this is a side that could win the Champions Trophy? On their day, yes. However, the days aren't coming very often, so no.
Oh,
Did we call? Oh, it's technical issues.
Wait,
Technical.
we're an hour and 5
Technical.
minutes in.
Yes, come on. This is TCM.
We're there, we're
Howzat.
fine.
If you're listening to this,
Just
there was a
to change the
long-running
audio.
joke. There was a long-running joke that Ben had technical issues, and now we've been going for an hour and 10 minutes. He has done it. It feels like an apt point to end this discussion on. Rob, Ben, thank you as always. It's been insightful. It's been fiery. It's been funny at times, and we'll have to do this again sometimes. Maybe, shall we say, second half of this year? How does that sound?
Well, we've got about 8 podcasts to get through now, haven't we? So.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, we've got the
Sorry, I've just checked. My calendar's a bit busy. We might have to postpone this till this time next year.
Yeah, exactly. And by the time I've edited this, it'll probably go out this time next year. Anyway, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Hopefully, we'll do this again. If you enjoyed, please do like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next edition of TCM Howzat.